Hello, everyone. My name is Otto Hedenmo, and I'm a doctoral candidate or PhD student at Jönköping University, Sweden, at the research department of sustainable communication. And before I start my presentation, I just want to start by saying how happy I am to be part of this conference and send my compliments to the organizers of a great program. Although I noticed in the beginning of the day that my school French wasn't really enough to follow the presentation in French, but so I'm really looking forward to the English part of this program. So my compliments to the organizers. Um, just like a quick check, do you hear me good?
Very good.
Very good, great.
Yes, very good, thanks.
Okay,
Great.
here in Spain too.
Sounds perfect.
It's
Okay,
great.
so what I'm about to present here is, well, I get in the program, it's the title is Transformation of Balance in the Turn to Virtual Collaboration, Mitigating Climate Change Collectively in Times of COVID-19. So that was the title for my abstract. And since then, this has developed into an article called Virtual Balancing. So that's why virtual balancing is written in so large letters. But before I start by presenting this empirical study, I just want to give you like a brief presentation of my PhD project and the phenomenon that I'm investigating. So my PhD project has the working title, The Meaning of Media for Cross-Sector Collaboration. And media in this sense is media for communication or media for technology, not like mass media. So it is an investigation of how media infrastructure and media usage influence collective action in these cross-sector collaborations. And I do this to a case study of a Swedish collaboration on climate change mitigation. And it's primarily connected to fields of organizational communication, media communication, and environmental communication. And I would say in that order actually as well. So to start with, to define like cross-sector collaboration, I mean, what is it? Because I mean, in the literature, this is very much one of these like phenomenologically driven subjects that it is investigated in a very large various academic fields, and sometimes it's called cross-sector partnerships, sometimes it's called inter-organizational collaboration, could be called public-private partnerships. But I mean, the core, the more like essential or core definition of them is that it's situations where organizations formally come together to solve a problem by sharing information and resources or to gain some kind of positive end, or in order to gain some positive end. And the sharing and of information and resources could be like immaterial, like knowledge or time, but also like material or financial resources. And to gain some positive end could be just to create a platform in order to have some like information exchange, but also to create some kind of material product or something like that. And this way of organizing has actually increased the last 2 or 3 decades, and it's because of many of like societal factors. But two of the factors that I'm interested in my dissertation is the reason for these so-called like 21st century problems that has made these kind of cross-sector collaboration to increase in society. And 21st century problems or meta problems or wicked problems, it's those kind of societal problems that are actually too hard for any organization or nation to solve on their own, and too complex and transboundary for any organization or nation to be blamed for causing them. And climate change is one of these. But another factor that I'm also very interested in is that the development of communication media has enabled organizations to easier connect to each other. It's through virtual meetings like this context, or through emails or digital documents or collaboration platforms, etc., which has kind of like reduced this geographical barrier between organization and made them more inclined to collaborate on different subjects. So let me continue. So why should we invest these cross-sector collaboration? Well, as a fact, this form of organizing actually become a vital part of the global response to climate change. I added a quotation from the IPCC report of 2018, which heavily emphasized like collective efforts or collaboration in order to create some kind of sustainable transition, and they especially emphasize equity and effectiveness. So there are like two core values in this, which is the democratic value for everyone to be part of this transition, but also when in terms of efficiency, that the transition will move faster if we do it together or do it collectively. And I would say that this like encouragement is very much, at least from a Swedish context, heavily emphasized. And from a national point of view, there's a lot of money put into creating these collaborations. However, when you look at the research literature, especially connected to organizational communication, they mean that these kind of collaborations are struggling in order to create some kind of collective action, mostly due to the complexity and transboundary character and different assumptions and opinions of what to really collaborate about. And I added this quotation from Kochman and Sanders, which I think is quite striking, saying that there's a notable discrepancy between a positive connotation to collaboration throughout society and the difficulties and disappointment of actual collaboration practice. So a lot of the research literature, especially in organizational communication, has been very much focused on investigating like positive or things that enables for collective action to be created, or when it actually fails. So now it comes to the focus of my empirical study, because one of these tensions or one of these like factors that is quite heavily studied is the balance of participation and efficiency. And this is an important tension to manage in order to create some kind of successful collaboration, because it very much builds upon the voluntary character of cross-sector collaboration, which means that organization can actually choose whether or not if they want to be in one of these like societal or societal cross-sector collaboration, and they can choose whenever they want to leave. So organizations need to see some kind of value for their time being in this kind of cross-sector collaboration. So they need to be able to participate, and they also need to see that there are some kind of consequences from their participation in order to create some kind of legitimacy for the cross-sector collaboration, but also in order to create some commitment from the participants. And this is all actually grounded in creating some kind of societal acceptability for the collective efforts to be achieved. But I mean, on the other side of the tipping board, you have efficiency, that you need to create some kind of collaborative value or collective output. And this means that the collaboration can't like, they don't want to risk getting stuck in never ending discussions where everyone needs to have a saying, but they also need to create some kind of progress to be able for authoritative acts to move the collaboration forward, because this also creates like a collective or collaborative value, the societal impact. So this is one of the like central tension of cross-sector collaboration, that you can't really have full participation and efficiency at the same time, but you have to balance them both. And a lot of previous studies in organizational communication has focused on this balance. However, few of them have investigated in a digital environment or in a virtual environment, which became the case during this COVID-19 crisis. Um, because in order for cross-sector collaboration to maintain collaborating, they needed to transfer their meetings in first place, because that's like the main place where cross-sector collaboration makes collaborate. They needed to transform to like a digital way of collaborating, which meant that they happened to be in a new environment with transformative or ways that could influence the collaborative practice. So this is what I've studied in the empirical study that I'm to present here, that how the turn to virtual meetings influence this balance of participation and efficiency. So it's very much a micro-oriented study. And I also was interested in what consequences this had for the collaborative practice. And how did I do that? Well, what I did was that I followed a collaboration on climate change mitigation for 6 months, which provided me with 14 hours of material from collaborating virtual meetings, and in my case, Skype for Business, that you can see represented in the top right corner. So I focused on the interaction in these meetings, and I performed a multimodal discourse analysis on the affordances used in this interaction. And affordances in multimodal theory is those like social and technological possibilities and constraints of using like a communication resource. So with this said, like in a virtual meeting, there are some like technological limitations of what you can do, but there are also some societal, well, I mean social limitation of what you can do in a meeting. So I wanted to focus how these social and technological possibilities and constraints enable participation, and in what ways they enabled efficiency and how they were balanced. And what I did was that I focused on screen sharing, the chat module, and I focused on speech and created an analytical toolbox with different like analytical elements that I decided to analyze in this meeting environment, which were connected to like concepts from multimodal theory. Um, and what I found was that during these 14 hours of material, there were three ways that were enabled for balancing participation and efficiency. And the first one was what I call efficiency through selective elevation, which was connected to the chat module of these meetings, because the chat module doesn't really have a counterpart in like a non-digital meeting. It is something that is added in the virtual environment, which means that there aren't really any norms or any like rules of how to use it. And this was rather uh, this was manifested in many different ways in these meetings, because the chat module was made for posing questions, answering questions. It was meant for more informal things as signaling your absence, and a lot of like different things, just showing your appreciation, for instance. So it was kind of a back region of the meeting, which also made it hard for the participants to see how to use it. So the participants that were in more powerful positions, such as the chair and the secretary, were able to selectively elevate comments from the chat module in order to be part of the like spoken discussion. And what I noticed was that these like elevation could be meant for use for efficiency, to kind of how do you say, to make a collaboration move faster, or to make a conversation to break and to move on in the agenda. And the second way that I noticed was that there was a lot of technological constraints in this turn to virtual meetings. I mean, recurrently, participants signaled that they were unable to see the shared screen, which kind of made the participants forced into a situation where they needed to negotiate this equal accessibility. Because what happens was that a bunch of participants said that we can't see really what you're talking about. So then the participants or the group needed to negotiate, okay, how do we solve this? And most of this ended up in being an adaptation of language, that you want to maintain efficiency by staying in this multimodal environment. However, this proved to be rather confusing for many participants, especially those that couldn't really see what they were talking about, which created a hard time for them to collaborate, and sometimes even making suggestions that people needed to retract because this wasn't actually what they were suggesting at all. So these technological constraints made it very hard to collaborate. And the third factor that was added in this virtual environment was the factor of interactivity. That interactive feature was added to the virtual meeting. However, the interactive features were only connected to some participants, and these participants could use it in different ways. And this was particularly noticeable when the group was co-writing documents. In this co-writing of documents, participants in charge could use like these interactive features to highlight certain issues by like marking text or scrolling to decide what area to focus on, which became guiding for discussion. And this actually proved to be really efficient and something that the participants were approving. However, it also reduced the way of democratically deciding what to be object of discussion. So this was like the three major ways or how I saw that balancing participation and efficiency was managed. So when looking at what these have in common, I concluded with two central factors of influence in this turn to virtual meeting. It was that the turn to virtual meeting enabled a transformation or extension of symbolic powers, particularly connected to the responsibility of the chair and the secretary. Um, and this transformation or extension was connected to traditional responsibilities, for instance, like sharing the word or writing the agenda, etc., but appropriated in this virtual environment, which create a centralization of power. So although that the chat module enabled some kind of like additional way for people to participate, or the co-writing of a document enabled an easier way to participate and change things in writing, it also meant a centralization of power, which could also be used for efficiency. And what I also noticed was these situations of technological constraints that actually force participation and efficiency to be negotiated. And this actually differ from like a non-virtual environment where efficiency is primarily like initiated by certain individuals in order to create some kind of momentum or efficiency. But this was something that occurred in these meetings and created a lot of confusion. Um, so these two factors was something that I concluded that are both important to acknowledge when turning to digital collaboration, because they both have an influence on this, what I talked about in the beginning, the legitimacy of the collaboration, but also the commitment of its participants. And this is something that I will continue to investigate in my dissertation. So this is like a first investigation of the collaborative practice, and now I will scale up this investigation. So with that said, thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, I'll be pleased to answer them, or if it's something that you couldn't follow. So do you want me to stop sharing now, maybe, or how do we do this?
That can be good to see the largely people, as you said, we negotiate the access. So thank you very much for your presentation, and you are in advance on the time schedule, but we will use this time, of course, for to recuperate a little bit of the delay. Anyway, are there comments or questions from the group of people who is here in the room or online? I have just the first question. It was on what you said so a few minutes ago, centralization of power. So I was interested in having an example because of course you presented, I would say, the general ideas and the phenomena and your conclusions and analysis, but it would be interesting to have a couple of examples of, for example, centralization of power, and also you said, the tension with the additional ways to participate. That was very interesting. If it's possible, and also I lost, but perhaps I was not very focused on the presentation at that moment when you talked about which organization or which groups you followed in your study, in your research. I didn't understand. Thank you. So 2 questions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Great questions. Well, to start with, the organization, the collaboration that I will follow is a case study of a regional cross-sector collaboration in Sweden, which is it's called the Climate Council of Jönköping County, which is one of these like public-private collaboration, and it's very much representative of these kind of collaborations in Sweden. They exist in almost every region, actually. And when it comes to centralization of power, what I meant there was actually that these how do you say, that these additional ways of communication resources that was added when turning to virtual meetings were only connected to some kind of individuals in the meeting. So in a way that they gave some kind of I don't know, impression that they would democratize the meeting, they were actually the abilities of using them was centralized to certain actors, and these actors were very much the chair and secretary. However, it should also be noticed, which I emphasize in my article, that chair and secretary of these public-private collaboration tend to be a public sector actor, because these kind of questions are very much connected to the responsibility of public sector. So in this sense, the public sector got a lot of more, how do you say, ways of conducting things when turning to these virtual environments. And this doesn't need to be a bad thing, but it's just like how these balance of participation efficiency and also like authoritative abilities in the meeting were transferred or transformed.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if there are other comments or questions on. So you said that this research is published now.
It's not published yet, but it's sent to journal, so it's about to be up for peer review.
Okay.
So it will come.
Yes. Okay, I think that we can thank you very much again.
And thank you so much. And if there's any more questions, I mean, that appears later on, anyone is very, I encourage them to contact me.